So what we're going to talk about today are Roth IRAs. And the title of this is Making Sense of Them. And oftentimes, whenever I give a program, I start from the most basic level of understanding. And so that may be beneath some of you. And you may have more technical questions that we will deal with. Because I'm recording this, I do want to hold the questions, if possible, until the Q&A section to make it a nice continuous recording that everybody can hear. And so some of the questions may be technical, and they may pertain to only your situation, and some of those things, it's difficult for me to answer a technical question without all of the information, and it might not be appropriate to share that deep background, but I will be very open about what I can and can't give you really good answers for. And then I typically follow up with people if they have a question that I can research, relatively quickly. You just can write it down on that little sheet of paper with your email address and just put in the parentheses your question, and that'll help me remember, who to reach out to for that type of answer. So Roth IRAs. The first thing I'm going to do to start from the basics is I want to describe for you what a traditional IRA is as opposed to a Roth. So once we understand what a traditional IRA is, I'm going to then compare and contrast it with a Roth IRA. And it'll start to give you some clues on how a Roth IRA can benefit you, your family, your spouse, and how it can be used as a planning tool from a tax perspective. So a traditional IRA is the most common IRA that you've ever dealt with. And I will say, when I use the word IRA, oftentimes the features are very much like your 401k or your 403b, so your company-sponsored plans. And the basic features here are that you're putting money away into the IRA pre-tax contributions, and you're receiving a tax deduction for doing it. You're getting a tax break to do it. You're saving on taxes. So you get to invest the money that goes in without having paid tax on the money before. Goes into the 401k and it gets invested, and it earns money over the course of time. Dividends, interest, capital gains along the way. You never have to, during that whole investment period of your life, that accumulation phase, you don't have, and even beyond the accumulation phase, even when you're retired and you have a regular traditional IRA. So regular IRA, rollover IRA, traditional IRA, those are all the same animal. And the money is not taxed during the time when it's being invested. It only is, and so the benefit of that, of course, is that you have tax savings right off the bat during your working years. You're lowering your tax bill. You're diverting some of the money you could spend on other things, and you're putting it into an IRA or a 401k or a 403b, 457 plan. These are all synonymous things. And you get to invest that money, and the government's just waiting in the wings for the eventual time period where you draw money out of it. And at that point, the government gets their tax revenue. Okay? So taxes are due later. And the key thing on this is that you'd think, well, if I put money into an IRA and I invest the money, I get my tax break right off the bat. And I invest it, and it grows and grows and grows, and I don't ever need it. You think, well, that's a great deal, so why do I ever have to pay taxes on it? I don't have to pull it out, right? Well, you'd be wrong, because with these types of tax-deferred accounts, the government forces you through what's called a required minimum distribution to pull money out of your IRA. And the magic age is well, it makes no sense, that at least from what I've ever read. The age is 70 and a half. So on your 70 and a half birthday year, so that means you turn 70 and a half during that calendar year, that's the point at which the government says you need to start taking out a minimum amount of your money from your IRA, your collective accounts of IRAs, 401ks. All of that gets added up, and you have to take out a certain amount of money. And that certain amount is based on a life expectancy table. So oftentimes brokerage firms will calculate that required distribution for you. But if you've got accounts all over the place, Fidelity, Schwab, Vanguard, wherever else. Each one of those has a required distribution, or you can calculate the sum total of all of it, and you can take it out of one spot. If you take it out of one spot, then you have to remember you didn't take it out of the other spot so you don't overdo it. Okay? So that's your traditional setup. Put money away, get a tax break, invest the money, don't pay the taxes for a long, long time, eventually take the money out to live, or eventually take the money out because the government forces you to do it, at which point you pay taxes. Key thing there is age 70 and a half. So, well then what's a Roth IRA? Because you just described a traditional IRA, a regular IRA, a rollover IRA, a 401k, a 403b, a 457 plan. I will say, I always speak parenthetically, it's ridiculous that there are this many tax-deferred accounts to deal with. It's too confusing for the general public, and frankly, Congress should come up with what I would describe as a universal retirement savings vehicle so that we can say one thing and we all know what it is. But I just described all those different titles and those different animals. So this is now a Roth IRA. So let's go through the exact same setup, but let's talk about the differences. First off, you're not putting away money that's never been taxed into a Roth IRA. You are putting money away that's already been taxed. You get to invest the money, and it doesn't have any tax obligations, meaning dividends and interest and capital gains, just like the traditional IRA. You don't have to pay tax on that as you're earning it. And frankly, you never have to pay tax on it with a Roth. Because you've put in after-tax money, the government says, okay, now you can invest it forever, and you can make money on your money, and we're never going to ask you to pay tax on this money. Now, you didn't get a tax break, so there's absolutely no savings on your taxes because you're putting away money that's already been taxed. But you never have to pay tax ever. And another feature of this is that this age 70 and a half rule, the required distribution, doesn't exist for Roths. So a Roth IRA doesn't have an RMD. And as we go through some of the planning tools and some of the benefits of a Roth within your family, that feature right there is an important consideration. It's not part of that RMD calculation, required minimum distribution. And incidentally, I have done a program solely on required distributions. It is posted on moneyseries.org. You can go to the video replay section on the website and you can look at that, watch that program. And I think it's going to be a repeated program because people always are focused on RMDs, which they should be. Because RMDs, if you forget to do them, is massively penalized. So don't forget. Okay, so with that background of comparing a traditional IRA with a Roth IRA, we now know we're dealing with a different kind of animal. It's really not a tax-deferred account. I want you to think of it as a tax-free account. So it creates a very new kind of entity, of vehicle for you. So here's some foundational concepts that I want to talk about before we start talking about benefits of Roth IRAs and also planning tips on how to use them. This right here is a picture. For many people, parts of this exist. For other people, very lucky people, all of these things exist. And it's really your full retirement income picture. And I kind of want to just focus on a few of these. Dividends and interest on your after-tax savings. So think about that as you're going to do your taxes and it asks you for what kind of dividends that you received or any kind of interest that you received. It goes on your tax return because it's money that's being generated from after-tax savings. Individual accounts, joint accounts, your bank accounts, a CD that you've invested in, trust accounts. All of those things are taxable vehicles. So they're not tax-deferred. They're not part of your IRA. They're not tax-free, so they're not a Roth IRA. They're taxable accounts. Okay, so dividends and interest are a component part for many people who have their own non-retirement based savings. Rent, so you may actually own investment properties where you have renters, and they're just generating income for you, and it will show up on your tax return. It happens to show up in a special spot called Schedule E. So you have a Schedule E for all of your investment properties, and it creates some complexity, but it's really not that difficult. It's like you're running a little side business, so people have that aspect. They have pension income, if they're lucky. And my generation, there will be fewer and fewer people with pension income. Then they have Social Security eventually. So Social Security is kicking in income after a certain age. Incidentally, I do a whole program every year on Social Security planning and optimizing your Social Security and making sure people understand how Social Security works, because it's a very, very important program for everybody, really. But for a very large chunk of people, it's a massive element of their income. So it has to be understood. And then people have 401k, 403b, 457 plan, employer-sponsored savings plans, along with IRAs that they may have set up that are simply, may even be part of a rollover, where you've rolled money over into a traditional IRA. That's why I call them rollover IRAs as well. And then there's this other vehicle called a Roth, which we just went through. So now we kind of know the difference between an IRA and a Roth IRA. They behave differently from a tax perspective. Really, the biggest fundamental difference is the kind of money you put in. You put in this after-tax money already. Other one, the regular IRA, you're putting in pre-tax money and you're getting a tax break. And then lastly, I just have this icon here for the idea that there's just cash or investments that have already been taxed. So this is sort of the result of that money. This is being invested in various types of taxable accounts. This is the income that's flowing from it. But I bring that up because it's going to be part of a planning tool utilizing the possibility of utilizing Roth IRAs or taking advantage of them. That cash pile does matter for people. So this is the picture for a lot of people. Different parts are highlighted for different people. The whole thing about Roth conversions that we want to take advantage of is this concept that there's a timeline in your life. Age 62, you retire, let's say. Age 70 and a half, you've got things that happen. A couple things happen really around age 70. It's the longest point that you can defer your Social Security. So you can wait and wait and wait and wait and wait. But you have to start taking it at age 70. Age 70 and a half, you can wait and wait and wait to take money out of your IRA, but at some point the government says at age 70 and a half you have to take out a required minimum distribution every single year from that point forward. So there's a timeline of income, and as it flows in. So you're plugging in pieces within your retirement spectrum of time, your timeline. The idea that you can actually manage the pieces of the puzzle, how they flow into this timeline, how they layer in. Dividends and interest, yes. Part-time work, yes. Getting my Social Security, yes. I'm layering in piece by piece by piece, and ultimately you get to the end, age 70, and most of your component parts are created, unless you're still in business for yourself or you're still working. But I'm presuming that there's a point at which you're no longer actively working. So all these layers of income flow in because you've plugged in the different component parts of that income. And the entire analysis of a Roth conversion has to do really, oftentimes the core of it is tax rate analysis. So as another fundamental concept that I didn't create a slide for, but I really need to make sure people understand the tax code. It's a progressive tiered-based tax code, brackets. So you can make, I'm going to talk about a couple, and I'll compare and contrast it a little bit with a single taxpayer. The first rounding, $20,000 of taxable income is taxed at 10% for a couple. That's the new tax law. From $20,000 all the way up to about $80,000 of taxable income, so that chunk of your income, it's taxed at 12%. That's the federal rate. After $80,000 all the way up to about $160,000, that chunk gets taxed at 22%. So you see there's a big jump from 12% to 22%. And then it keeps going up. 22 goes to 24, 24 goes to, I think, 28, and then it starts to go all the way up, and I think they've got the top rate now at 37%. And all those things are changed as of 2018. Singles, you know, the first 10,000, just basically cut everything in half. First 10,000 is at 10%. The next, you know, 30,000 is at 12%, and then above that, for a chunk of money, it's at 22%. So these ideas of tax brackets, what you want to make sure of is that when you do a Roth conversion, so now I want to make sure you get what I'm saying by a conversion. You've got an IRA, traditional IRA, it's never been taxed. The government allows you to purposely take money out of that IRA and roll it right into a Roth IRA, converting the traditional IRA in part or in whole. You can choose how much. It's not it's not an all or none proposition. You can take money from the traditional IRA and you can convert part of it into a Roth IRA. When you do that, you're purposely putting income into your tax return. Remember, the traditional IRA has never been taxed. So now it's going to go into the Roth and it's going to become taxable income. So when you're purposely doing that, rolling it into a Roth, you're purposely pushing up your income. So what you need to be very, very cognizant of is if you do a conversion, for various reasons in your mind you want to do a conversion, the analysis, typically speaking, is, am I going to actually be paying tax on that purposeful converted income into my Roth conversion? Am I going to be paying tax at a rate that is higher than I'll have to pay in the future when I have to take money out of my IRA? And if you find that there are people who've accidentally, not thinking, have taken a lot of money out of their IRA and put it into a Roth through a conversion process, pushing themselves up into a tax bracket that they never would have been in otherwise. So they're cutting off their nose to spite their face. Like, wow, I'm converting a lot into a Roth. I'll never have to pay tax on this ever again. It's tax-free. I've already paid the tax. Well, you pay the tax at a higher rate than you otherwise would have if you pieced it out bit by bit by bit for years. You could have kept yourself into the lower tax bracket. So the biggest strategy is making sure that you're timing this conversion to keep your taxable income within a tax bracket that is advantaged better. So, you know, as a quick parenthetical, I might be getting ahead of myself, is there are times in your life when your income is low for a temporary period. There may be times in your life where your income is low for a temporary period because you made it that way. You planned it that way. You structured it that way. And that's when Roth conversions can be a great planning tool. So you're timing it. You're gaming the system. Wow, my income is lower because I chose to live off of cash holdings as opposed to working, as opposed to taking, you know, getting a pension at this point, or filing for Social Security. I've got a low tax bracket right now. Perfect time for me to plug in a Roth conversion. I'm going to push my income up, but I'm going to do it at a really low tax bracket. Does this make sense, what I'm saying there? So this is the gaming of the system. Tax rates are the key to everything. So the benefits of a Roth. So let's kind of talk about a few. I've got 3 or 4 benefits that I want to talk about with Roths. So converting is a mechanical process. Taking a regular old IRA, a traditional IRA, and purposely putting it into a Roth is called the conversion. It's very simple to do. It pushes up your income on purpose. Once it's landed in the Roth, there are benefits to having the Roth. So I'm talking about why would anybody ever want to put money into a Roth or convert money into a Roth. They're really synonymous things. The conversion is a big process, a big mechanical thing. The contribution into a Roth while you're working has the same kind of benefits. Okay? So here, the Roth IRA benefit, diversifying your future tax rate. if you think about it, when we're doing a tax-deferred account, you're doing a traditional IRA, a 401k, a 403b, 457 plan. I just keep repeating that because I figure it'll stick and as a mantra. You're getting a tax break that year based on the tax world you're living in at that moment. You might be a really high earner during the, your peak of your career, and you're putting money away into a traditional IRA, and it's super powerful because the tax savings are so big because you are making a lot. And you do that year after year after year after year after year. So let's say you're a specialist, you're a physician, and you've got lots and lots of savings, and you do all of your savings in your 401k or your IRAs. And you find yourself at the end of your career with a very large chunk of money that's never been taxed. And now you have to live. So let's say you don't have a pension plan, and let's say your Social Security is good, but it's a small chunk of what you need to live the lifestyle that you've created. So now you're in a position where the only way to fund your life is to pull money out of your IRA. And you're pulling your money out of your IRA, and it's pushing your tax rate higher and higher. And whenever you need money as a one-off event, like I want to buy a car, I want to re-roof the house, I want to paint the house, I want to take a special vacation, you don't have money sitting in a already taxed account that you could pull from. That you could pull some out of bonds and not pay a lot of capital gains tax. You could pull money out of a CD, a rainy day fund, and you don't have to pay any tax at all on that because it's already been taxed and it hasn't gone up in value, so there's no deferred, capital gain to pay. So you've got all of your life inside of this tax-deferred bucket. And then the government finds itself in a position where it doesn't cut taxes, it actually starts raising taxes. So now you've put yourself in a position where you're at the total mercy of what Congress will do in 10 years or in 15 years or in 20 years or next year. So the bet is, wow, I don't really know where tax rates are going to be. And if I do all of this tax-deferred savings and I'm going to eventually have to take money out of my IRA, and I don't know what kind of tax I'm really going to pay, it does create this non-diversified tax structure in your life. You don't have multiple buckets to play with. You can't game the system that well. You're just totally at the mercy of tax rates when you get to the point where you need the money. So this idea of having your savings in multiple different kinds of buckets. A taxable bucket, meaning it's just simply after-tax savings. It's in your individual account, brokerage account, joint account, invested in stocks and bonds and whatever else. Your trust accounts. All of those types of already been taxed money is called that taxable bucket. Tax deferred, we've talked about it ad nauseum. We know what kind of accounts those are. And then you have this other thing that's called the Roth IRA. And this Roth IRA is a completely tax-free bucket. This taxable bucket could be capital gains, dividends and interest generate income, and that gets partially taxed. And then this tax-deferred bucket is all getting taxed as ordinary income at whatever tax rate the world is charging at that time. So this idea of a Roth is really part of diversifying your tax structure in the future, because you can't make a prediction about what the tax rates are going to be in the future. I'm getting a great tax break now. It feels really good. I'm saving on taxes at a time in my life when that makes sense and it feels good. But if you do all of that saving in one form, you're putting a lot of eggs in that basket that the future is not going to be, a much higher tax rate than what you saved at. In that case, you would have wanted to put away money into a Roth or convert money into a Roth now as much as you can without messing up your tax structure, without going into a new tax bucket. So that's one benefit of a Roth, is the diversification. Another benefit of a Roth is that your beneficiaries, so each, just like a regular IRA or a traditional IRA or a 401k, blah, 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 you have beneficiaries attached to your accounts. Oftentimes it's your spouse if you're married. If it's not, it's then likely your kids, or the contingent beneficiaries are your kids. So someone down the line is going to inherit these IRAs, and that's exactly the same with a Roth. Roths have beneficiaries as well. When your non-spouse inherits an IRA, So let's presume that they're your children, niece, nephew, another generation lower, maybe even 2 generations lower. The government says, well, you have to take, as the inheritor of this money, you have to take some money out of your IRAs. And that's exactly the same with a traditional IRA as it is with a Roth. The only difference is, with the traditional IRA, just like when you took money out, you had to pay tax on it. If you inherit a Roth IRA, you have to take it out, but you don't have to pay tax on anything that you've taken out. Now, slowly but surely, they want those 35-year-old, 40-year-old who inherits hundreds of thousands of dollars in a Roth IRA, and I know of personal examples where that's happened. While you have to take money out year by year by year, and it's based on a life expectancy of the person who inherits the money, they're slowly trying to get this money out of what is a tax-free state, and they're trying to put it into a taxable bucket. They don't want it to go on and on and on for generations. Otherwise, you're creating a situation where if you can divert money into a Roth and never have to take it out ever, and then you can inherit it and never have to take the money out ever, you really are creating a system where the government will never ever see tax dollars. And of course, we know that's never going to happen. So this idea of stretching, you're going to hear that if you read a lot about these things. One of the benefits is of a stretch IRA, a stretch Roth IRA or a stretch regular IRA. They get to stretch it out over their lifetime. And that can be a long time. I've had examples where the planning was done, large Roth conversions happened. It was for estate planning purposes many years ago. So back then the estate tax thresholds were a lot lower. And so they converted huge amounts, relatively large amounts of money out of traditional IRAs, paid a pretty hefty tax because you can't do it all at once, But in this case, the person was dying and knew it, and they wanted to give their kids the best benefit possible, and they wanted to lower the value of their estate. So they converted a large chunk, paid a high tax, removing money out of their estate by paying a high tax, and then their kids inherited Roth IRAs. And they inherited large Roth IRAs, and for every year since then, they've been taking out once a year a chunk of money that's not taxable to them at all, and they're still investing this money without ever paying tax on it. So it's a very, very, very powerful vehicle for leaving it behind. So it kind of creates a perverse incentive. I want to set up a Roth IRA. I want to do a conversion. I want to convert while it's still a low tax rate for me, temporary low tax year. I want to do Roth conversions. And I may never, ever personally benefit from it, because one of the big benefits is keeping it intact for your children. So part of me wants to roll my eyes because you can't live your life in total sacrifice of your children forever, but this is an example of a really big benefit for your heirs, is this idea of a stretch feature. Okay, another benefit of a Roth is, once we went through all those fundamental concepts in the beginning, you know now that a traditional IRA, all of your tax-deferred vehicles, someday, especially by the age of 70 and a half, you have to start taking money out of them. And you may not need the money out of those regular IRAs. You may not need it to live, but the government's forcing you to put it on your tax return as taxable income. And so it may actually push you up into a higher tax bracket than you want to be in, because you've saved a lot in tax-deferred vehicles. It's pushing your income up because you have to take the money out as required. And there is actually a situation where, because of that income, ordinary income, because you're pulling it out of your IRA, it's ordinary income, plus your dividends and your capital gains, plus all the other forms of income, rental income, various other forms of income in your life, because I showed you that whole grid of all the ways you can make money. The government actually says, once you file for Social Security, we don't really know how much of it we're going to count as taxable income to you. If you don't have a lot of other income, we will tax none of it. So you might get a Social Security check of $2,000 a month, but because you don't have any other forms of income, or very low levels, it's not super duper low, it's $30,000 of other forms of income, then we're going to tax none of it. But as you start making more or have other forms of income, we're going to tax all the way up to possibly 85% of it. And this 85% in this whole formula, it's called provisional income. What are all your forms of income? And they even count half of your Social Security as part of that income. The reason they count only half of it is because presumably your Social Security benefit is based on how much you've contributed, half of which you didn't contribute. Your employer did. If you're self-employed, you did both sides, but not really. You had one hat as the employer, and they put the money in for you, and you put the money in for you. And the other half was your own employee contribution. So they say, we're going to count half of it because half of it wasn't you, plus all your other income. They're going to call that provisional income, and that provisional income is going to define how much of your Social Security gets taxed. So if you think about this, the more that you can take out of your traditional IRAs, your traditional 401ks, while you're younger, the lesser your required distributions are going to be out of those traditional IRAs. The lesser that income is, the more it's going to push down your provisional income or keep it down, which is going to actually lower the amount of tax you have to pay on your Social Security benefit. And that works in reverse. You have to be careful that when you do Roth conversions, or you do anything, take a capital gain, and you're already collecting Social Security, you have to recognize that you may be pushing up your provisional income temporarily, one-off event for that year, causing not only having to pay tax on whatever it is that you did, but you're actually then increasing your income further because Social Security becomes more taxable. So you can see there's lots of moving parts dealing with Social Security, but one of the benefits of a Roth is you're taking it off the table for your required distribution calculation. And that allows you to pay less tax on your Social Security. This all started in 1980 or right around 1980 when Alan Greenspan was put on a commission, and his job, their job, was to figure out how we were going to shore up the Social Security funding system, and they needed additional revenue. So they said, we're going to start taking more of people's paychecks. We're going to push up the retirement age from 66 to 67. They're going to work that slowly up, and they've achieved that. I'm a 67-year-old projected full retirement age. And then they said, you know what, people who have other forms of income, enough, we're going to actually start taxing Social Security. And that really is kind of a bait and switch, because the idea that you put your own money away, you put it into Social Security, you've already paid tax on that money. It was not a tax break to do it. It's your own money being put into it after paying tax on all the income. And then they say, oh, when you get the money out, we're going to also pay taxes. So, but it happened. It worked. And it may, that at 85% may become 100% someday if they need to shore up the system further. Pushing out the retirement age is going to be a harder one, in my opinion, because it's not really fair. If you are like me, working with paper all day long, you know, maybe it's okay for me to be forced to work till 70, especially with medical advances. But if I'm a construction worker and I'm physically in a very physically demanding job, it's a lot to say for someone who may not have access to health care and has to work a very physical job to say, oh, you can work till 70. It's like, you may not be a choice. At 62, I may get hurt and I'm pretty much out of commission. Other people can get by. So it's not really a fair thing to just say, increase the Social Security, or increase the age for full retirement. That would be an unfair solution in my view. So that's another benefit, is lowering your RMD income because you've taken money off the table from the traditional IRA and you've put it into a Roth, which is a tax-free bucket. So this one is related, but it's a small little nuance. Because you've taken money off the table and you've put it into a Roth and you don't have to take it out for required distribution, not only did it help the potential taxation on Social Security because you've lowered your income enough so the provisional income wasn't so high. You also are in a situation where if you think about all of your income pieces with relation to your spouse who survives you, some things will go away, but some things won't go away. If you have rental properties, that rental income still flows in. If you have Social Security with one really high earner and one person who stayed home and didn't have a big work record themselves, they're going to lose their own smaller spousal benefit, but they're going to keep yours, so it only goes down a little. Pension income, if you've selected that you want your spouse to continue getting your pension income because that's what you chose at the beginning of your pension years, that income stays around. All of your after-tax money, all of your joint accounts and your individual accounts, just because your spouse dies, that doesn't go away. So the income you draw off of that stays the same. Your IRAs, your 401ks, whatever tax-deferred vehicles you have, or your Roths, those don't go away. Those are inherited by the spouse. So a lot of things stay in place. But what does change? What changes is that you're now filing as a single taxpayer, not a joint taxpayer. Married. You're no longer married. And because of that, all of those income levels that used to be taxed at certain rates are now all cut in half, the brackets are, and you might be actually, as a surviving spouse, paying taxes at a higher rate than you were before they died. So one of the benefits of the Roth, in the context of a surviving spouse with a situation where you have a lot of other income that's going to stay in place after your death, is that you actually are taking, again, money off the table from the traditional IRA that's forcing you to do the required distributions, and you're putting it onto a tax-free bucket, that Roth IRA, that does not have any impact on their taxable income. And because they're in a higher bracket, that's really valuable money to have put over into the Roth. So if you can convert along the way strategically, then you're actually not only helping, you could be, if you look at it, you say, I'm doing a conversion right now and I pay at the 12% bracket, but if I look out into my retirement years, I'm still in the 12% bracket, so why am I actually doing this? Because you're actually anticipating there might be a point where I pass away or my spouse passes away and all of a sudden I'm in the 22% bracket. So that tax neutral conversion is actually not tax neutral because you're planning ahead for the possibility, the likelihood, certainty, I should say. You will at some point be alone. You or your spouse. You're very unlikely to die at the same moment. And so there could be a series of years there where the tax rate becomes higher, and that's the reason that you wanted to push some money into a Roth. It has to be done very carefully and thoughtfully. That's why a Roth conversion analysis is not something that you just do like that. You have to actually sit down and calculate out in your mind, what am I actually doing here? But that is one of the other benefits, is that the tax rate for a surviving spouse could actually jump. So I gave you some benefits of a Roth, and I've hinted at some planning tools. So let's kind of go through a few planning tools, and then we'll wrap it up. And I've alluded to these things as we've gone along. So ideas to enable Roth conversions. So if you think about what we were doing, we were looking at that timeline and plugging in place different forms of income at different times of your retirement life. And oftentimes I'll tell you the spectrum of time is like early 60s to age 70. That's the planning period, oftentimes, where you can do things in certain ordering. You can live off of certain chunks of money where you can purposely lower your income or keep it low, and then you can plug in strategic Roth conversions. There are other things you can do too, but plugging in strategic Roth conversions at a rate that's low enough that later on you know you're saving money on taxes, so it was worth paying the tax now on purpose. So one of the strategies is that you actually might have cash sitting in CDs or bonds that don't have a big gain, or even stocks that haven't gone up. They generate a lot of dividend income, but they haven't gone up a lot. You have access to money that you might say, you know, I'm not going to file for Social Security quite yet. And I'm going to get into the reasons why you wouldn't do that. And because of that, I'm not going to have that form of income flowing into my tax return. But what am I going to live off of? well, I could pull money out of my IRA, but I don't know. I think I want to hold off on doing that. Why don't I live off of my cash savings for a few years? Because I've got enough after-tax money that I can draw that down comfortably. I can be in a super duper duper low tax bracket. Like, frankly, I don't have much income at all. And because of that, I can strategically do Roth conversions, pushing my income up to a point where I'm still not paying a huge tax rate. So you're plugging in Roth conversions at a time when you're drawing down from your cash savings that the government gets no take from. That's the importance of having in those earlier years, because you don't have to take money out of the IRA. You don't have to take Social Security. You can delay those things. You can create a very tax-poor situation and then take advantage of it through Roth conversions. And if you keep yourself low enough by taking cash and living off of it, remember, as a couple, you have a standard deduction of $26,600 right off the bat. So that means the first Roth conversion of $26,600, there is no tax. Then you have a bunch of income that's going to get taxed at 10%. That's really low. And then you have a bunch of income up to $80,000 at 12%. That's pretty low. So you're able to do a Roth conversion at a very, very low rate because you've utilized the standard deduction plus the low tax brackets, all because you are living off of cash. You only can do that if you have A, enough cash, and B, you're comfortable drawing that cash down. Cash is king because it's the kind of money you can pull to do those special or unplanned expenditures in your life where the government doesn't really get a take from it. So that is one idea to enable Roth conversions and benefit from a Roth conversion. I talked about Social Security, and I'll say this one has a double benefit. If you delay Social Security, that means you're keeping that income out of the equation, keeping your taxable income low, you're doing Roth conversions at a low tax rate. That's one benefit, is that you've chosen to delay Social Security. The double benefit of it is, as you delay, your Social Security benefit increases 8% per year, roughly. So at age 62, you can take the money, but you can wait around until age 70, and you can get a humongous increase. The analysis on whether you should do that or not is not simple. It's not cookie cutter. There's everybody out there gives blanket advice that says, of course you should delay Social Security. You're getting an 8% increase for every year that you delay. Of course, that makes total sense. Well, you have to look at your situation in life. A, can you afford to do that and still live the life that you imagined? And nobody can guarantee that you're going to live long enough to have to have voluntarily not taken Social Security and then live long enough to have it pay off that bet. No one can guarantee that. The odds are, I'm a former actuary, the odds are pretty clear that if you have good access to health care and you've lived a healthy life, and you have a spouse especially who's going to step into that bigger benefit, that the odds are you will win that bet. You are being put into a pool of lives, some of whom are very different than you. They don't have access to health care. They haven't lived a healthy lifestyle. There are lots of genetic reasons that people may not live as long, worked a much harder life than you, for example, physically. You're rated within all of those from an insurance perspective. And so you're actually at an advantage because you've got more information than the government has, and so you actually get benefit by waiting. But that isn't a cookie cutter thing. You have to think it through and you have to be pragmatic about it. But the benefit of this double benefit is, of course, a Roth conversion can happen because you delayed Social Security. How did you do that? Because you had some cash to live off of, because you had other forms of resources to live, allowing you to do Roth conversions that keeps your tax rate low. The great double benefit is the longer you wait, the better your Social Security looks for you and for your spouse. So that's an idea, is delaying Social Security as long as you can. Now, this one is the last slide, and I want to talk about this idea because it really almost trumps, and it's funny that I even use that word, but it almost trumps the Roth conversion tactic. So the concept is that you're in a low tax year and you can plug in purposeful Roth conversion income and do it at a low tax rate. But I want you to know that there's a very special tax rate of 0 on all forms of on long-term capital gains and certain types of dividends if that income fits inside the 12% bracket when you do your taxes. So married couple, you've got forms of income minus a deduction ends up being $50,000. So you had $75,000 of income from various sources minus 25, let's roughly say 25,000. You had 50,000 of taxable income. Well, that means there's $30,000 of room left in the 12% bracket. If you've got a situation where you're sitting on a stock or a property or something that has a capital gain that you haven't yet realized, you haven't purposely sold it and realized the gain, you can actually sell it, realize the gain, and pay no federal income tax, $30,000 worth of gain. So you're literally looking at it and saying, I could fill the gap right up to the cap of the 12% bracket, and I don't have to pay any tax on that. Well, that is the existing law as it is now. If you've got a situation where you're sitting on a gain and you've got room in the 12% bracket, I first want you to think about taking that gain. You can reinvest in the exact same thing you took a gain in right away. Like, sell it, realize the gain, buy it back. Now you don't have a gain anymore, but you own the same stock. And you've taken it and put it in your tax return and you pay no federal tax. You will pay a state tax, but you'll pay no federal tax. If you've got that situation, do that first before you plug in the Roth conversion income. The Roth conversion income will get taxed at ordinary income rates of 12%. You'll be missing out on that 0% rate. You may even have some dividends and some capital gains that just were happening, that if you fill up too far, you might even push that into a higher bracket. So the point is, this is your very first advantaged tax rate for capital gains and for dividend income. But there are times when you've got gains that you've realized. So your investment advisor's gone through the year, they've sold things at a gain, nothing extraordinary, but something they've sold at a gain. You look at your tax picture by the end of the year, and you're like, okay, well, I've got room where I can do Roth conversions. Let's call it $30,000 worth of room. But I happen to have a gain of $10,000 or $20,000 sitting in my tax return. But I have a loss sitting on the books that I haven't yet taken. Why don't I take that loss, harvest that loss? It'll offset the gain. It'll bring everything down $10,000. Now I can do a little bit more of a Roth conversion. So managing both the capital gains and the capital losses, knowing this, but also knowing that it might make room for a Roth conversion is important. Okay, so that is the whole presentation. Some of it is too detailed, I understand. Some of it's not detailed enough, but so that's what we're going to do now in Q&A, and we can kind of go through some specifics. But first, I want to, of course, thank the Senior Center for allowing us to have this here at their facility and all of the partners of the Money Series, and I'm so happy that you all came.